Hey guys, welcome back, and today we are here with another week of Broadway grosses, so let's get into it. And yes, I have no hat on. That's because the air conditioning in my house is broken and I am dying of sweat. But let's get into the video. Juliet went from 88% to 91% and 966k to 904k, which isn't amazing for Aunt Juliet, but it has done worse and has done in the 8s and in the lower 8s, I know that. But for Aunt Juliet, again, you don't want to see it, you know, in the 700 range. That's when you start to get concerned. And even at 904k, it's a pretty significant drop, and with royalties and all that stuff, it's a costly show. But it's not going anywhere, and it manages to do well enough in the spring and in the summer and in tourist months that it will be fine. But it definitely has shown weak spots throughout its time on Broadway. A Beautiful Noise is closing. That went from 67% to 68% and 929k to 968k. Back to the Future went from 78% to 81% and 872k to 930k, which is a much better week for Back to the Future, but it is still quite weak, and it's not making what it needs to weekly to like survive. Despite that, though, again, I believe that in the summer it's going to do well enough to make up for the lackluster months in the past couple months, and then it's able to maintain itself throughout the fall. Could it close? Yes, but again, I don't see that happening. I mean, it made crazy amounts of money over the Christmas break, so I definitely do think that this, you know, will be fine. Cabaret did 99% last week and 99.95% this week, going from 2,009,348 to 1,965,344. Hadestown continues to do solid business and has been saved, having 97% last week and 99% this week, and 810k last week and 833k this week. Hamilton went from 100.4 to 100.15 and 1,723,901 to 1,858,132. Hell's Kitchen continues to be a box office behemoth, an unexpected hit of gigantic proportions. Playing to 100% capacity, and 1,503,809 last week, and 1,557,434, almost half of 2 mil. So again, I think Hell's Kitchen, I mean, with how well it's doing, I have to think this can't just be because of the Tony noms. So I don't think this is gonna close in January or even in a year. Like, I think this might be here for a little bit. This could be a big hit. So I'm very interested to see how much it will fall off in the fall, because it's gonna do great numbers regardless of the Best Musical winner in the summer. But for right now, Hell's Kitchen is flying high. But again, we won't know, is this gonna be sustained momentum, or is this just, you know, right now? But typically when shows do this well, it sustains it. Illinois went from 94% to 90% and 679k to 816k. So I'm very glad that the show is finding an audience. I think it just needed time to be here, and it's such a crowded season. A lot of people don't know the album, and a lot of people do. As I said in previous videos, when I saw the show, people were like, I don't know what this is about, I just know it's based off of an album. And for it being a dance musical and for being very high concept, you know, it is more mainstream than Akimbo and A Strange Loop, but it's still very high concept, and for it to be doing this well gives me hope in audiences and that their willingness to take on more daring work. And I know that Illinois has the brand behind it, but for a lot of people, they don't know this album at all, so for a lot of people, this is an original work, even though it isn't. Lempicka finished on a very good note, not a good note, but better, from 87% to 96%, and 419k to 588k. Merrily went from 100% to 100%, 1,518,186 to 1,582,919. Moulin Rouge saw a huge decline after Boy George left, going from 1,528,631 to 1,172,642, and going from 100% to 99%. So clearly, Moulin Rouge needs big stars, because while this was a good week, it's a soft week. And from a show that's as expensive as Moulin Rouge, you kind of need to be doing 1 million 2, 1 million 3, 1 million 4 to really make up investors happy and to keep it going. But again, I don't think it's going to close anytime soon. But again, it is interesting to see that Moulin Rouge, you know, as powerful as a brand as it is, seems to have relied heavily on stunt casting, which you wouldn't have expected, you know, if you asked me, you know, when it first opened a couple years ago. 6 did solid business, 90% last week and 91% this week, 850K to this week's 844K. Suffs went from 93% to 92%, and 802K to 820K, so it's continuing to climb up very well. I think that it's doing very solid, but I don't think it will sustain that in the fall, and especially, well, not a lot in summer, but especially in the fall. And I do think it will close in January, because it's one of those shows that needs best musical, that best musical win to get it by. But I could be wrong. You know, if it stays in the 8s and the 7s, it's gonna be safe, I think. Gatsby continues to impress me despite getting slaughtered by critics, slaughtered by Tony voters. It's continuing to maintain its momentum. Last week it did 90%, this week 97%. Last week 1,180,502, and this week 1,279,656. So Gatsby, I think, is going to be here for at least a solid year. Again, things could change when we get into the fall, but I know at least for the summer it's going to do great numbers. And again, I think that it would, you know, shows like Gatsby and Hell's Kitchen, when they're doing as good as they are doing now, tend to fall off, but not fall off where they close. So again, I think that they're in a good place for now. The Heart of Rock and Roll continues to fail from 69% to 61%, and 319K to 287K. When is it closing? The Notebook continues to do subpar numbers. 87% last week, 88% this week, 786K this week, or last week, and 784K this week. It's getting by. It's not failing. It's not in any danger of closing. But for the brand of the Notebook, it is disappointing. It is underwhelming. And you have to wonder, it's going to do well in the summer, but could it fall off so much in the fall that it closes in January? I think that is a very, it's not a likely outcome, but it is something that we have to take into consideration. And it definitely would go about as like one of the most unexpected flops. The Outsiders went from 1 million to 990K and selling out. The Who's Tommy went from 85% to 81%, and 991K to 969K. The Wiz went from 95% to 95%, and 1,567,632 to 1,497,307. And to tap it off, Waterfree Elephants went from 83% to 84%, and 1,074,006 to 1,101,619, which is pretty solid. I do think Waterfree Elephants will still close probably in January. It's not doing big business like Gatsby or even Hell's Kitchen is, and the capacity is quite soft. So I think it will do decent enough in the summer, but then I think it'll start to fall off pretty big once we get into the fall, and then it will close. So those are the grosses for this week. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.